Good morning, and thank you once again for joining me this Thursday on Voluntary Virtues. This is the conversation with Kelly Diamond. We're on episode 35. Yay, me. And today we're talking about, well, I'm talking about, and you get to listen to me, talking about rationalizing violence. And I feel like this is a theme that's come up to the point where, once again, I'm noticing a bit of a pattern. I've discussed this once before, how there's a certain amount of psychological acrobatics that go into trying to justify killing people, right? We have to dehumanize the target, or else it doesn't work, or else we're guilty, we're murderers, and we can't just be murderers, right? We have to dehumanize them and say, well, they're monsters. Well, they're not really, they're subhuman, right? And with that, throughout human history, that's kind of how it's been. But I would say that I'm noticing this pattern surfacing once again in various conversations that I've had, including war now. So now the justification for war has become that very similar argument to spanking and to the death penalty. And the rationalization for war comes in with, and of course, it's always laced with that greater good thing, right? And if it's not laced with something about the greater good, then we better start trotting out the children real quick, because without something emotional to glom onto, killing is really barbaric. It needs a noble context for it to make sense. What's funny is that self-defense doesn't always appear to be as warm and fuzzy as for the kids, Killing a trespasser can sound a little, a little harsh and a little brash to some, but at the end of the day, this person is on your property, right? I mean, ostensibly, you've at least issued a warning before you've killed them, but they are in fact intruding. And in that regard, they could pose a threat depending on what you see or don't see. Right? So self-defense doesn't always come in a cute little package that looks, that looks palatable. But I would sooner defend that on absolute terms than to start saying, create your own narrative, choose your own adventure, and we'll see if killing in mass makes sense. Killing in mass doesn't ever make sense to me. And there might be a context under which you could actually come up with something. And yes, I have seen instances where somebody has killed in mass in defense of their country, and at least in their country, not going to another country. So, okay, I can hear that argument out and then discuss that on a case by case basis. But I was, there was this moral equivalence that I'm seeing a lot of lately regarding ISIS. And on the one hand, you have, this guy was burnt alive in a cage, and here's this horrible image. Then there's the statistics of how the U.S. went out to Iraq and, was carpet bombing people and, using white phosphorus and depleted uranium. The long-term effects and even the short-term effects of such toxic material is staggering, really. To see the birth effects, the generational toll that depleted uranium alone is taking on just the Fallujah area it's another Chernobyl. And it's like a horrible science experiment of Dr. Moreau gone wrong, white phosphorus has its own horrible immediate effects. The burning, and I've seen what it does. I can only handle so many images, but and I've read about what it does. I'm not a scientist, but I will say that they weren't designed to make you feel good. They were designed to do damage, and they do. Depleted uranium alone is what makes the United States government the greatest polluter in the world, because that's what we leave behind. That is our footprint, every time we go to war. So, okay, this person was burnt alive and we're doing this and it's back and forth. Well, 1 minute, one person will say, and here's the spectrum of argument. War is some nasty business. You're never going to find anything good in it, right? All right. What are you saying with that? Are you staking claim? Are you picking a side here, or are you just saying, well, war is war, it is what it is, and yeah, you're gonna have some nasty shit on both sides. I'm not gonna qualify it as good or bad though. I won't go that far because that would be unpatriotic, right? That would be quite incriminating for at least the United States anyway, because I'd have to call out bad for bad. Then there's the other side that says, well, if you mean to tell me that this guy's gonna set American soldiers on fire, and I could potentially stop it by setting one of theirs on fire or splashing a little water on them, then I'll do it. Of course, I have to trivialize what the United States is doing and exaggerate what ISIS is doing in order for this to resonate, right? You're not just, waterboarding isn't just splashing water on somebody. It is indeed, it is meant to give you the sensation of drowning. And I met somebody once in high school, just to give you an idea of what this means. Okay, I was in a biology class with a young lady in high school who was explaining to me that she had a cousin who was on life support. And basically, what happened is her lungs would constantly fill up with water, and just as she felt like she was going to drown, they would drain. And I guess she was on some sort of support system. I don't know what her condition was called, but that's what was happening with her. And she said it has to be the most grueling thing for her to constantly feel like she's drowning, right? But it doesn't, like, it's not like she gets used to it. There's certain pains, there's certain pains you can get used to, like your knees, you're like, it becomes more of an inconvenience than it becomes a pain. It's the same pain, but you kind of get used to it, that type of thing. That's not what drowning is. Yeah. Well, anyway, I think back to that and her description of that, and I think waterboarding is just that, you know. And my thing is okay, I'm not sitting here trying to justify what ISIS has done. I'll take you at your word that this is what they've done. These are all the horrible things. I have said this before, and I will say it again. Somebody doing something horrific is not a free pass for us to do something horrific back. Somebody behaving in a criminal fashion is not free license for us to go and behave criminally in return. Criminal is criminal. If it was criminal for them to do it, it's criminal for us to do it. It doesn't change. Circumstances don't make criminal activity all of a sudden become okay. Premeditated murder is never acceptable. Premeditated killing and taking of life with malice and forethought is not acceptable. It's murder. It's always murder. Self-defense isn't murder because it's not premeditated. Self-defense is in the moment. And self-defense doesn't necessarily come with an intent to kill. You could accidentally kill somebody in the process of trying to defend yourself. It doesn't necessarily come with malice. It could come with fear. But I don't know if you're necessarily in a place of malice and starting to formulate opinions about your attacker as much as you are formulating opinions about your situation, your immediate circumstances. It could come with malice, but it can't come with forethought. Premeditated taking of life is murder no matter what. Okay? That's what war is. War is, I'm going to go in there and kill some motherfuckers. There's no way around that. Otherwise, you're not in a war. You're in a debate. Okay? You're in a parade. You're in a lot of things, but you're not in a war. War is specifically designed and meant to go kill people. So I'm listening. I'm looking at these various arguments. Some people are just like, well, it is what it is. You're kind of apathetic toward it because it's just part of war, and they've kind of been resigned to it. And then there's those who say, well, if this is what they're going to do, then yeah, we're going to go in and do the same thing. I don't feel bad doing that. But when you break it down, here's where it comes. Here's where it all comes together with the violence. I'm not a violent person. I don't want to do this. War is some nasty business. I certainly don't want to be in a war. It's not like I want to send our prime beef out there and fight in the desert. I'd rather them come home. All of this is the caveat, right? Before the huge but clause. Because right now I'm priming you and I'm qualifying myself, right? I don't want to be in a war. I don't want people dying. I don't want our poor veterans coming home with PTSD, all maimed and shit. You think I want that? Righteous indignation, right? But what? But what? You just told me how horrible this all is, but there's obviously something that could compel you to say, well, it's worth it. It's worth it to send our prime beef out there and fuck them up. There's a reason. There's something noble that I'm going to cloak all this shit in. Well, by all means, tell me this divine cause. I must know why this man must go and get his body parts blown off and why he has to come back all fucked up with PTSD. Please tell me why it was worthwhile for him to do that. And certainly your thanks is enough. Right? Thank you for your service and your yellow ribbons and shit and your parades and whatnot and your salutes and your medals and your ceremonies. Certainly that alone carries some intrinsic value. But assume for a minute that you're talking to somebody like me who sees absolutely no fucking worth in any of that. You got something for me, something that I can wrap my head around and feel good about a war. Well, all that stuff is just ceremonial bullshit. The reality is that ISIS is raping and killing children. Ooh, here comes the kids. Here comes the kids. God, man. It's almost as if you can set your clock to it. My period isn't as regular as that fucking argument. I could literally set my clock to when a person is going to trot out the fucking kid. Okay, sure. I'll indulge it. They're raping and killing children. So, this whole war is because ISIS is raping and killing children? Is that what this war is really about? I thought it was a war generically on terror. But apparently it's specifically all about these poor children being raped and killed. We care. We care about this shit. We're fucking Americans. We're a civilized society. What the fuck do you think, Kelly? Of course we care about this shit. You don't care about fucking kids getting raped and killed? Oh, I do. I do care about children being raped and killed. There's a whole Facebook page dedicated to children who have been assaulted by cops alone in the United States. We have our own ISIS right here in the United States. We have a violent gang claiming authority through force and victimizing children. And they do that all day here. Sex rings and human trafficking with children. They're involved in this shit. Let's go one step further. There's a whole registry. I've talked about it before. There's a whole fucking registry of sex offenders out there. Let's assume that 70% of them, 60%, here, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, 60% are actual sexual offenders, like not statutory rape and not pissing in the goddamn alley. I'm talking about, and not masturbating in a freaking, in a theater. I'm talking about serious sex offenders that actually go out and violate other people. Okay, that group, that crowd, that horrible crowd. Not the, you're just a perv. Not that guy. I'll eliminate that from the crowd, and we'll just go straight for the violent offenders, the rapists and the child molesters, the predatory sexual offenders. Let's go with that. 60% of the list has to be those guys, right? 50%. That's still a righteous list of people. If I'm sitting in Pakistan right now, okay, and I'm looking if I was looking online at these registries, I'd be fucking beside myself. Look at all these rapists. Look at all these child molesters. Is that cause enough, right? My question is that cause enough to start a war? Because that's really convenient. If there is a murdering pedophile syndicate within your borders, then any country is justified in blowing your shit up. Is that really what we're saying? We are justified in blowing up shit in the Middle East because ISIS has been reportedly raping and murdering small children. I had one person appeal to me and say, they're disemboweling them, for fuck's sake, Kelly. We have serial killers here who torture people. We torture people. The United States government tortures people. What the fuck is your point? If that is bad, if you want to argue that that's bad, then it's always fucking bad. And so when the United States does that shit, it's also bad. Not justified. How the hell how did it become criminal for them to do it and righteous for us to do it? You care about children being raped and murdered. Why the fuck don't you care about that happening in Southeast Asia? It's been known to be happening in parts of Eastern Europe. It's been known to be happening in parts of Southeast Asia. Women are being trafficked, showing up in fucking freights. It's happening in Central America. And God only knows what the fuck's happening in Africa. We won't even touch that shit. Children are being raped, mutilated, fucking killed, recruited for wars. I mean, Jesus Christ. Children are being shoved into fucking diamond mines. Yeah, you give a shit about kids? But of all the places where you're going to take up the mantle, it's the fucking Middle East? How did that get the lucky draw? I mean, was this a lottery? We have all these fucking countries with pedophiles, human trafficking, treating children like dog shit. Where should we go? Well, I'll tell you what, we'll have a nice fancy luncheon. Donald Rumsfeld will stick his hand in a fucking fishbowl and draw out a country with a sexual syndicate in it. Well, everyone, it looks like it's Iraq. Is that really what happened? Is that why we're there? Tell me again how we're there for the fucking pedophiles. And if that's how we handle pedophiles, then I expect that the MRAT and the Bearcat rolling down our streets will soon be carpet bombing areas where we know sex offenders live. Right? It's just a matter of time before the DHS starts, unloading their hollow points on us. Right? I mean, that's it. You got to wage war. That's what you just told me. You told me that ISIS is doing all this horrible shit to kids. So anybody who does horrible shit to kids means that we got to fucking take a tank down their goddamn streets and bomb the shit out of them. Now, in the United States, thus far anyway, at least prior to militarization of our cops, it used to be that you would take a few undercover cops, try to get them to infiltrate these crime rings and bring them down that way. It used to be that that's what we do. It was really stealthy. Only a few individuals were involved. You know, it was top secret. Their identities were hidden. And while I'm sure it still came to some level of violence, it wasn't mass murder, right? We were really careful about how many innocent lives would be lost. Would they even go so far as to take their tactics to where it might jeopardize these kids that we know exist but we don't know where yet? We don't want to compromise their safety. We were actually concerned. There's actually have been, and hey, listen, I'm not all about the police, but if we're going to compare tactics to tactics here, we haven't used wartime tactics against pedophiles in the United States. I don't understand why we have to use wartime tactics against pedophiles in Iraq. If you really want to bring them down, is there no other CIA way to do it? Do we really have to use the full might of the US military to bring their shit down? That's the only way. And if we're going to talk about how much we care, right? How much we really care about brown children getting raped and killed. We fucking care about that shit, people. We care. We care so fucking much that when small brown children came to our southern border from Guatemala and Honduras, fleeing from a life of servitude to a bunch of fucking drug cartels who would likely treat them the same way children are treated in Africa, as fodder, as prostitutes, right? They're fleeing this life. They come to our southern border seeking refuge and sanctuary, and what the fuck do these same neocons say? Turn your ass around and go home. Oh, so if we can't bomb them for you, that's the only solution we have. The only solution we have towards pedophiles and people who exploit children are bombs. We can't actually take those children in. That's getting our hands a little too dirty. It's one thing to go kill people. It's another to help them. I'm happy to kill people for you, but I can't be taking your kids in or anything like that. That's asking a little much. So go home, right? This is that. I mean, to me, it's like, hey, you had an opportunity to actually help brown kids who could potentially be victims of, sexual abuse, exploitation, certainly horrible degrees of cruelty. They're being kidnapped from their families. But we're not going to help those brown kids. We're not going to help the ones that are closest to us, that are right at our fucking border begging for help. We're going to help those brown kids. And we're going to help them by bombing the shit out of their country and leaving them with generations worth of fucking toxins. So that for generations to come, years to come, you could start giving birth to what may or may not be a human being anymore, with such deformities and such horrible medical conditions. And then you could say, well, the good news is that at least you're not being raped and killed by ISIS, right? Now, granted, you've got legs growing out of where your ears should be. Small price to pay. Is that the conversations you think are happening in Iraq? Hey, listen, I don't like the idea of there being pedophiles and murderers and rapists and whatnot out there, okay? I don't like it. I think it's horrible. I think it's scary. I think it's, it's a threat to our children. You name all the bad things that you can list, double that list. That's how much I abhor these crimes, okay? I do. I don't condone what they're, not only don't I condone what they're doing, I condemn anybody who would rape and kill a child. Anywhere. I don't give a fuck if you're in a Muslim country or a Christian country or a Jewish country. If that's what you're doing to fucking kids, you're fucked up. That being said, we're waging a full-scale war in the name of saving children from pedophiles seems just slightly overreactionary to me. Right? I understand. There's something about rape and pedophiles that gets the murder blood boiling. People want to kill and torture people who do this. I don't know where those particular embers are stoked from, honestly, because I don't ever get the urge to take life like that. There is a considerable difference between saying I could cut a bitch out of frustration and never ever going near that, never ever doing any such thing, and actually planning out how you're going to cut a bitch. Okay? Getting the weapon, stashing them somewhere, creating an opportunity so that you could lure them in, doing it. Going through the elaborate process of planning on and how to execute somebody versus just muttering something under your breath are two totally different things. But the same people who say, I would never want this. I would never want to kill somebody. But sometimes you have to. Okay. Sometimes, my sometimes, and I can tell you exactly what that sometimes is in self-defense. Not in retribution, not as a blanket pass for me to go invade a full country. I mean, if you're using pedophile, are you saying that pedophiles don't, it isn't terrifying what they do? It is terrifying what they do. There's a lot of things that are terrifying. There's a lot of things that are terrifying. There's a lot of things about human behavior that are terrifying. That's not an excuse to go have a fucking war. I'm sorry. That's not it. I mean, seriously, the way people talk about war is the same way they talk about fucking spanking. I don't want to have to do it. It hurts me more than it hurts them. I mean, are you seriously playing the victim here? Do you really want me to feel sorry for you? Is it that they made you do this? Your child made you spank them? ISIS made you invade them? If that's truly your argument, just say so. I mean, I'm going to dismantle it within seconds. But it's as if I'm going into war under duress. I'm striking somebody twice my size under duress. It's not like I want to do this, but I haven't the choice. When you're dealing with nothing more than a broken vending machine, you just gotta smack it a few times until you get your fucking candy bar out. I see, this is what I'm hearing. I understand there are bad people in the world doing bad things. The answer is not simply going out and killing in mass. If that's the answer, then you're not looking at the problem, because that seems to be the generic answer for everything that poses even a moderate threat to the United States in some way. Fuck it. Something that simply offends our sensibilities, it's enough to go and fucking kill people. I mean, I'm just wondering, at what point did we become this murderous society? I imagine it's around the same time that we became really pussified and had to compensate in some way for it. Because I really feel like our society, American society, is so wrought with fear. Irrational levels of fear. And we're so, as a society, People are so fucking freaked out about everything from measles to ISIS. I don't know if there's any more room under your bed for another boogeyman. And so we have these people sitting here plotting what we should be doing. Slaying dragons all over the fuck. We need to go fight this war, and we need to go do this, because these people are doing bad things, and we can't let people get away with bad things halfway around the fucking world. Okay, but there's people doing those same bad things here in English, in the United States, posing more than the fucking rapists out in the goddamn Middle East. Shouldn't we do something about that? And please, can we just put a pin in the idea of not waging a war? Can we put aside the war tactic and just see if we can come up with a more peaceful way to address pedophilia? I mean, for my sake, I don't need to be chock full of shrapnel while you're trying to go hunt down a fucking pedophile. Yeah, it's all well and good that that's who you're after, but in the meantime, all the collateral damage, it's not like it's not like we're out there holding trials to see if they're actually guilty of anything, right? We're not actually doing that. We're just assuming that anybody who's remotely belligerent is tied to ISIS, and therefore, by association, are all rapists and fucking murderers. Apparently, I'm not allowed to make that same general statement towards cops, but we can say that about people in the Middle East. The acrobatics that people go through to justify this kind of violence, I mean, honestly, I can't follow it, nor do I want to, really. But worse still is that it's becoming easier for people to accept violence as normal. Normalizing violence so that there's a certain algorithm where it triggers it and says it's fine for you to do that, or it's fine for us to collectively do it, or it's always fine for the government to do it. And that's how people are being conditioned. And it's a tragedy. It's a travesty to humanity that this is what's happening. In the meantime, while there's killing en masse, there's this brainwashing en masse. And that's why you don't hear people speaking out against it. Even as they condemn violence, they still support, there's still that holdout. Have a great week. I'll catch you next time. Bye.